All right. I think we're good. Well, good morning. Good morning. If you are joining us online, welcome. We're glad you're here. We're starting a new class today, a new study that we're going to do on the life of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We're just calling it covenant because that's really, Abraham is the start of the covenant that God makes. And so we're going to get there, but to get there, we've got to start and work our way up to it. So this morning is going to kind of be a Sunday School 101 review, and then we're going to work our way up to the actual introduction of Abraham. So to get there, we're going to start at the beginning. Literally. In the beginning, God made the heavens and the earth, right? And so Genesis 1 and 2 are creation stories. And so there's our beginning. And so at the end of Genesis 2, how are things? Good. God repeatedly said he made this, it was good. He made this, it was good. He made this, it was good. So at the end of Genesis 2, everything is good. At the end of creation, everything is good. God saw, chapter 1, verse 31, God saw everything that he had made, and indeed, it was very good. So, now let's think about the things that were good. What was the relationship between God and humans like? It was good. That relationship was good. That God and humans were in harmony, in relationship. God was not just the creator who gave life and then put them in this nice little garden, provided them with food and all this stuff, but there was relationship. There was also a relationship between humans and the land or the earth, right? And it was good because the tree and the garden provided everything that they needed. They didn't really have to struggle or strive. The land is supporting them with food and really everything that they need, and in turn, they're taking care of the land. Now, then there's the relationship between humans and the animals. And what was it like? It was good, right? Because the animals and the humans were, and this is trivia, and so this is an aside, and this is not in my notes, and I'll probably get in trouble because I always do when I go off notes. But I wonder if in the garden before sin, if humans could talk to animals. Here's why I think that. There's nothing in there about Eve being surprised that a snake's talking to her. It's not a big deal. This snake says, "What did God?" And she doesn't go, "A snake is speaking?" No, it's just normal. She just has a conversation with it. Now, some people tell you, well, that's, literary and blah, 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 blah. And that's fine. It may be. It doesn't matter either way. It's just, my weird brain and what I'm thinking. But, I just wonder if before sin, when they had this relationship, if that was, Robin? There you go. Yeah, it's no big deal. Robin says when Balaam's donkey talked to him, he wasn't all that surprised. And if one of his cows started talking to him, it would be a big deal. And I agree, it would be a big deal. So, but anyway, that's aside, doesn't have anything to do with anything. But humans and animals, that relationship was also good. And the final relationship was the humans themselves between male and female. And again, that relationship was good. Everything was in harmony, one flesh, without shame, all that. And so there's this great, it's perfect. God has made this thing. It's perfect. It's good. It's everything that it's supposed to be. And so, as we know, then on the other side of this, Genesis 3, sin comes into the picture. And when sin comes into the picture, everything is not great anymore. And then chapter 3 through chapter 11 is just this continuing downward spiral, right? It just keeps going down from that point. It just keeps getting worse. And it's like when you think it can't get any worse, it gets worse. And when you think it can't get any worse than that, it gets worse. And it's just this continual spiral. But sin comes in and all these relationships are fractured, right? Now God and humans are separated. Now humans and animals are at minimum separated, at maximum adversarial. The humans in the land, no longer does the land just bring forth fruit. They have to work the land. And really, even the relationship between the male and the female is damaged. They acknowledge their nakedness. They blame each other for things. And so from that point on, it just goes through with this downward spiral. And that's what starts in chapter 3. And so you've got, let's mark this so we'll remember it. Genesis 1 and 2, and then Genesis 3, and then 3 to 11. And so it's interesting. You'll hear people talk about the Old Testament God versus the New Testament God. Have you heard that argument now? If you talk to some of it's popular among younger people, but this Old Testament God was evil and wanted to kill everybody, and the New Testament God is all love and grace, and that's not really true. If you look at how does God respond to all of this, He responds with grace. He doesn't just clamp down on them. He still clothes them. He still takes care of them. I mean, he responds with grace. It's not really. It's written different, so it sounds different, but it's still the same thing. And so then we've got after that we've got Cain and Abel, right? And that's one of the ones that comes after that. Then you have Noah and that whole generation and everything that comes after that. And then you have the generation after the flood, Babel, however you want to pronounce that. I've heard it both ways, and I don't know that anybody knows the right. But and so there is this continual downward spiral. And we keep getting the same thing where people think they've got it all together and they're doing and the sin is just destroying everything, and it's just like this cancer. It's just like this disease that's plaguing humankind, and no matter what happens, it keeps coming back. I mean, God even wipes out the whole thing and starts over again, and it's still there. It's still, even after all of that. And so God's response to the sin problem. How does God respond to the sin problem? Well, every single one of these, he responds with grace. There's punishment, but because Adam and Eve need to realize that what they've done is not appropriate. But again, like I said, God still clothes them. God still takes care of them. Cain and Abel, God still protects Cain. He gives him that protective mark so that he won't be. And everybody's like, well, if Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, are the only people, why did he need to mark him? Well, again, we're back to this relationship. Maybe he marked him because he's wandering out in the wilderness and he didn't want him to get eaten by a lion because he needs to, I don't know. I'm just speculating. We can speculate all day. But again, he responds with grace. God responds to the generation of Noah with grace by sparing Noah's family. He doesn't totally destroy everything. He keeps that one family and grants humanity a chance at a fresh start. Again, there's this continual response of God with grace. And so Genesis 3-11 demonstrates that while God is committed to this creation, He's not ready to give up on this creation. He's committed to the well-being of this creation, and He's determined to create a solution to this human sin problem. But none of the other solutions seem to be effective. Adam and Eve are expelled. Cain is protected from, but is a fugitive. Humanity's wiped out. And even though God stops the tower from being built, that human pride and arrogance is still there. And so in all this, we get to Genesis 12, and in Genesis 12, really from there until the rest of the Bible, that's when God's plan really starts. And so that's why you've heard me say that Genesis 3-11 is the Old Testament of the Old Testament. And it's kind of like the history, And now, a lot of that is oral tradition, and it's retold and all this stuff. You got to keep that in mind. Whoever wrote this, and people say it's Moses or whoever, I don't know, I wasn't there, but they weren't there. And so you get people quibbling about Genesis 1, and, well, was it literal? Was it, whoever wrote it, they weren't there. And so they weren't just saying, hold on, God, let me get this. And God created it's centuries maybe. We don't know. And so we can, there's whole people that have made a career out of quibbling over those things, and I'm not going to do that. So, because we're trying to get here, because here is where God's going to put this plan into action. And He's going to put this plan into action that is going to change everything. So Genesis chapter 12, verses 1-3. Somebody who has a Bible, read that, because we are going to, that's where we're going to go. Genesis 12, verses 1-3. So, God, this is fascinating to me, because again, we've got God responding in grace. Why does God choose Abram? Genesis doesn't say. Genesis doesn't say, well, God looked down and He found this guy who was. It doesn't say. Now, there's some other places in the New Testament that give us some clues, but why do you think, let's just speculate here a little bit, and we'll kind of talk a little bit. Why do you think God chose Abram? Anybody? He wanted to follow God. Some of these other clues that we see in the New Testament, we get this idea that Abraham was what? Anybody? Come on. Upright, righteous, obedient, all those terms. And so, but I still say it's an act of grace. Because if you were going to choose somebody to make a great nation and to bless all the nations of the world, would you choose this old guy that's set in his ways and comfortable? I mean, he's living in Ur of Chaldees, and we don't know a lot about that, but some of what we know from archaeology is that it was a metropolis. They had decent buildings and city, and it was, it wasn't New York City, but it may have been New York City for the time. Are you with me? And so it wasn't beat ice. It wasn't, it was a major metropolitan area, and we get the picture that maybe Abram was, at least taken care of. I don't want to say well off, because we don't know that. We make that leap sometimes, but we don't know that. I mean, we can make that guess because of when he starts moving, it talks about what? It talks about his holdings and his livestock and some of that. And so for anybody to own any livestock at all in that culture, you had to be a little bit well off. That was today I don't know what our status symbols are, the house, car, whatever, but that was your status symbol. How much, because that was the primary currency. So anyway, so we know Abraham is at least comfortable, I think it's fair to say. And so we get this, and God puts this plan into action by selecting this family, the family of Abram. And he starts off by making certain promises. What are the 3 promises that he makes there? He's going to make him a great nation. Okay. Is that yeah, it's a great nation. Make his name. I'll take that. That's good. What else? All nations will be blessed. It's hard to write down this low. And y'all think it's bad. And people at home are just having to look at me. So he's going to make them a great nation. He's going to make his name famous. All nations are going to be blessed. He's going to give him the land that he's going to promise him, right? And he makes all these promises, and his it doesn't come out and literally say it, but it seems to imply that some of this, the blessing of all nations, is in response to this sin problem that's been deteriorating. And so we get here, Genesis 12, and these promises are going to be repeated to Abram on many occasions. It's going to be repeated to Isaac. It's going to be repeated to Jacob. This is the covenant that God is making. And if you are obedient and you follow me, you're righteous, you do what you're supposed to do, then I'm going to do all these things. But they're not contingent on one another. He doesn't say, if you do this, I will do this, right? Read it. He doesn't make it, now, if you do this, I'm going to do this, but if you mess up, I'm out. Our contract's broken. He doesn't say that. He says, I'm going to do all these things for you. It's interesting because, we think of covenant, we use terms like contract, but it's not really, when God's involved, this is not a contract that both parties are going to participate equally. God says, look, I'm going to do all these things for you because I've got a plan, and I'm going to use you to fulfill my plan. And he doesn't really say, you have a choice. He doesn't really say, now, if you want to, or you know what I'm saying? There's not really if you read, you go to, when the angel comes and visits Mary, it's almost like she gets a choice. If you read that story, it's almost like he's waiting for her to say yes. Abram doesn't really get a choice. He doesn't say, are you game? Are you in? Are you interested? He doesn't. He just says, look, this is what's going to happen. And so God is like, I'm through messing around. I'm going to set a plan in motion. I'm going to rectify this sin problem that is destroying creation, that is destroying the world. And so in order to do this, I'm going to start with your family. And I'm going to bless your family because I'm choosing you. I mean, it's fascinating to me because there's a lot of, there's not any real reason given for Abraham's family being chosen. There's not any real reason given for God deciding to make all these promises. And it's not like a reward. It's not like it's not like that Abram earned all these things. It's like God is making a plan. And this is my plan, and this is how I'm going to put right all the relationships that are fractured by this sin problem. He says, I'm going to make you a great nation, and you're going to have many descendants. Now, this is fascinating because at this time, Abram and his wife have how many kids? None. They have no kids. Now, in that society, by the time they're that age, it'd be pretty apparent that there's, they didn't have fertility doctors and all the stuff we have, but they would have figured out there's something wrong somewhere. And it was almost a shameful thing that you couldn't have descendants. And so, but you look at the problems that plague all of these promises, and the promise of being a great nation. Throughout this story, the women of the family are going to struggle with infertility, and Sarah and Rebekah are both called barren in the Bible. And so this small, insignificant little family that you would not think is going to be a great nation, that promise is suspect from the very beginning. He's promising them land. At this time, that land is occupied, and there's not a for sale sign in the yard. So that's significant, because if you look at it on paper, again, this is another promise that doesn't make sense. Because the Canaanites that live in this land are not looking to move. So here we are, the promise of being a blessing to the nations. Abram and his family don't really have the ability to bless anyone they encounter, let alone the whole world. And so again, another promise that appears suspect on the front. And so God tells Abram to leave his homeland and go to Canaan. We've established that where Abram lives, he's pretty comfortable in. That the life he has seems to be okay. They don't have children, and so obviously there's an issue there. But he seems to be fairly established. And God says, go. Yes, sir. What's that? Right. Okay. Steve says sometimes when your life gets shaken up because you're too comfortable, maybe that's the point. And maybe so. It's interesting because I can't help but put myself in Abram's position. How would we respond? You know? I mean, I don't know how God appeared to him. I don't know. Moses at least got a burning bush. Did Abram get a vision? Was there an audible voice? I don't know. But at some point, regardless of what it was, you got to be second guessing yourself later. I mean, we all would. Was that a dream? Was that just some bad tacos I ate? What was all that? I mean, we would. Let's be honest. It's a big deal for him to just up and move. I always make the joke to my preacher friends, because you never hear a preacher getting called to a smaller church with less money. They always get called up. You notice that? And God's calling us away. And preachers don't like that joke, but it's true. That was, anyway. I've experienced a call once in my life, and I don't use that terminology. I don't talk about it a lot because it makes me sound hokey and like, I think I'm some kind of super Christian or something, and I'm not. But when we were living in Spring, we had a comfortable life. We had a house. We had 2 kids. Hillary was starting out a counseling practice with some other folks and other counselors, and there's a lot of messed up people with a lot of money in the Woodlands, so that was pretty good. No offense if you're watching from the Woodland. But that was a good gig. I was working for Conroe Independent School District. I had been there about, at that point, 13, 14 years. And so, pretty established. I was teaching other teachers, and so I was the one they sent the new teachers to get trained. And so, I was fairly well known in the district. I had a little bit of seniority and whatnot, and we get this offer out of the blue from this little bitty church in West Texas that says, we want you to come preach for them. And I laughed because, yeah, whatever. I quit that a long time ago. I'm not going backwards. I'm done with that. And we went back and forth, and it just kept coming up, and it kept coming up, and it kept coming up. And we would go to church, and we even went and asked elders, pray with us because we're struggling with this, because it won't go away. And we were praying and what do we do? And it seemed like every week I'd come to church and the sermon was in some way about listening to the voice of God. I can't, it probably wasn't. It probably just was where I was. But again, and so finally we go, okay, we're going to go and have the interview. And so, I talked to them on the phone. We talked back and forth. They said, we're going to, we want you to come out here and interview with us in person. So, okay, I'm going to go have the interview. And I told Hillary, we'll go up there and, we'll just get it out of my system. And it'll be over. Because they're not going to want me. And so we drove out to West Texas. And, Hillary's born and lived all her life in the Woodlands. And so you can imagine, right? As you get further and further into West Texas, there's fewer trees, fewer houses, fewer people, fewer everything. And, the further you go, the further you can see. And I used to make the joke that, we were so far out, you could watch your dog run away for 3 days. But literally, way out there. And so we get out there and we come into town, little bitty square, and there's one stop sign, and you come to that stop sign, and on the corner is one of those park benches. And you remember the black signs that had the white letters, and it was always a message from God? You remember those? And it would say whatever, and they've had them everywhere. Well, on the back of that bench was, do you know where you're going, God? I rolled down the window and start hollering in the middle of this square. I'm here because you told me to be. I don't want to be. I got a feeling that Abram feels the same way. What are you doing to me? I don't want to do this. I don't, I told you about that joke that I make with preachers, but if you read the Bible, usually the call of God is something they don't want to do. It's usually being called out of what's comfortable and what's easy and what's normal. I mean, you go through and you look at whoever. I mean, Moses had left all that stuff behind, all that Egypt mess, right? And he had a pretty comfortable life. He was shepherding. He was done with all that. And God calls him. He's 80 years old. Moses thought he was done. I'm hitting retirement, right? And here he goes. God says, go back there. And he's like, no. There's a whole big chapter where he gives every excuse he can think of. And God's, oh, well, you do that, I'll do this. You do that, I'll do. All the way through. You go to the New Testament. The apostles leaving their fishing boats. I mean, that's walking away. I'm going to tell you, Jesse was Zebedee was probably not real happy that this guy walks by and take his best hands off the boat, and there's got to be some family conflict there. And wherever you go, you got to know that Abram had to be struggling with this. And so I think that we minimize the magnitude of him going. And what do you think? I've ranted and raved about this for a few minutes. I want to hear from you if you have thoughts on this. Have we minimized have we minimized the magnitude of Abram accepting this call? Am I overemphasizing the magnitude of Abram accepting this call? What do you think about, he's told, I think it's verse 40 of chapter 12, he's told, get up and go, and he does. I think that's a pretty big deal. Now, what do you think? I want to hear from you, and if you have any thoughts on this. It had to be scary, right? I mean, you're... Okay. Uh-huh. We're coming up on 3 years. Right? Abraham's got the big 21-foot U-Haul. Yes. Very good point. Norma says another thing that we minimize is that a lot of these promises Abram's not going to see in his lifetime. Make you a great nation. I mean, even though he's going to give him he's not going to see that. That's a very good point. All nations of the earth will be blessed because of you. He's not going to see that. Very good point. Nobody? Yeah, just... Ooh. Yes. Tim says he also is moving into a place where he is afraid for his life. That's why we see him lying. We'll come back to that. We're kind of overviewing right now, but we'll come back and go through in detail. But yeah, he's not in a safe space. He goes from a safe, comfortable space to something that's probably not. Good point. Anybody? I don't want to step on anybody's toes, because I think I think the greatest threat to the promises that we're going to see in this story is Abram. Abram and his family are the biggest threat to the fulfillment of these promises. The lack of faith. And, we marvel at Abraham's faith, and as we should, but there are also a lot of instances of lack of faith that are a threat to whether these promises are going to be fulfilled. And we're going to see that over and over. I think that'll preach right there, because I don't know about y'all, but I'm my own biggest enemy. I'm my greatest threat. I mess more stuff up for me than anybody else does. I don't have a supervillain that's out to get me. I don't need it. I can do that by myself. I think we all understand that a little bit. You're going to see frequently that Abram and his family are not going to trust God to do what God says he's going to do, and so they're going to take it into their own hands and make it happen. We don't do anything like that, right? You're going to see that he's going to pawn off his wife as his sister. He's going to use Hagar as a surrogate mother. They're going to laugh at God when he once again promises them a child. And then we're going to get into Isaac, and Isaac's family is completely dysfunctional and messed up. And, he's playing favorites among his kids and pitting them against each other. And then we get to Jacob, and Jacob, you don't see many, the Sunday school lessons, right? When you're growing up, it was be like Abraham, be like Moses, be like Noah. You didn't get many be like Jacob lessons, because Jacob is a hot mess. He's into everything, and he is the definition of dysfunctional. But he has 12 kids as a result of this really a love triangle between him and his two wives, and this reproductive contest that the two of them get into, for lack of a better word. But we keep seeing the biggest threat to the problem or to the promises are Abram and his own family. You got to wonder as we go through this at God's patience, because God has this plan to bless the world, and yet at every turn it seems like this family is doing something to be unfaithful or to sabotage that. And God is committed to his plan. He's just going. And I also find that encouraging, because like I said, I see myself in here as being my own biggest enemy. And I also see that God's going to keep working even when I'm messing up. And again, that'll preach. So then by the time we get to the end of Genesis, we're going to see some of these things coming to fruition. We see that God is working on a plan, but it's at its infancy, and where it's going to go, we don't know. But there are a few things, a few key concepts that we're going to carry through this. The main thing that God asks Abram to do above everything else is to trust him. I don't know about Abram's relationship with God before this, if perhaps there was one or there was not. But it would be hard for me to trust completely. Right? King? Oh, really? Okay. I don't know. Uh-huh. Right. Leave and cleave. Oh, that's really good. That's really good, King. Y'all missed that. I'm not going to even attempt to restate that. Come to class. Look, we got plenty of room. You can social distance. It's safe. We'll take care of you. But yeah, and you got to wonder again. We touched on this a little bit. Why do you think? Why does God select Abram and Sarah? They're not super righteous. They're not super Christians. They're not super faithful. It's interesting to me because he believes God. He trusts. That's really what he does, and it's credited to him as righteousness. Again, encourages me in my life that really all I'm supposed to do is trust that he knows what he's doing. I'm not saying Jeff said you just believe and you'll be saved. That's not what I said. I'm saying, what does God want from me? Well, what did he want from Abram? He didn't say, Abram, if you do this, this, and this, then I'll do this, this, and this. And it's going to be a quid pro quo kind of thing. He said, I'm going to do all this stuff for you. And he really didn't ask him to do anything except what he told him. I don't know what would have happened if Abram had been disobedient. If God said go and Abram said, I ain't going to do it. Or like Jonah tried to go the other direction. I don't know. But maybe that was part of the point. We're asking why God chose him. Maybe God knew he would be obedient. Now we get into all this who knew what when, and that'll make your brain hurt. So we say all this to say this is our overview. This is where we're going. That God starts out right here with Abram and says, look, we're going to set about a plan, and this plan is going to carry through the rest of the Bible. That from this point, Genesis 12 on, God is working a plan to redeem mankind from this problem of sin that has destroyed all the relationships that God created. And it's not going to be fulfilled for hundreds of years. But this is where it starts, and this is going to be an interesting journey. So that's our introduction. That's kind of hopefully getting us going, and we will expound on that next week as we dig in a little bit deeper and in a little more detail. This was kind of the flyover, and now we're going to come back next week and start and work our way through. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your participation. Once again, as usual, I talk too much, and so I'll try to ask more questions next time. But it's kind of hard in here, but and it's just me. So thank you. Next time we'll get in a little more depth and walk through this journey of Abraham. So 15 minutes, and